Hi, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing fine. How are you?
I'm doing well.
So how did we end up on Zoom? I thought we were in Microsoft meetings.
So yeah, the state agencies use Microsoft Teams, but since PSC is doing the facilitating of the meetings, we use Zoom. And when we looked at capabilities for the different kinds of tools that we wanted to use, made sense to do Zoom.
Well, I'm happy. I have to work on 5 different platforms, and I'm most comfortable with Zoom because that's what we started with. So that's good to hear.
Good,
I
good.
mean, I'm happy with Zoom. Except it doesn't come with my virtual backgrounds though. I have to put them all back in again.
Give folks a few minutes to join. I never would have dreamed that we would have been able to start these breakouts ahead of time. So helpful. Good morning. Dan, glad you're able to join us.
Morning. Thank you.
Nice background, Dan.
Thanks.
Just as a reminder, the chair mentioned earlier that we are recording all of our meetings, all of the breakouts, as well as that main meeting are being recorded. So they will be shared on the task force's website, along with the other communications. Give ourselves just I have 10:29 on my clock, so just gonna give it a few more moments. Great. Well, let's begin. Good morning. Welcome to the subgroup meeting on permitting and design review. I'm Elizabeth Riggs, and I'm a senior consultant at Public Sector Consultants, and I'll be facilitating this conversation this morning. The public is welcome to join and observe these discussions, but we would ask that members of the public to please mute your microphone and leave your video off. But for those of you on the task force, feel free to keep that microphone unmuted and your video on so that we can have a good conversation. I do want to do a quick recap of our charge this morning and the facilitation approach. This group is charged with reviewing recommendations from the ASDSO report. Today, our focus is going to be to organize our thinking on those, particularly those that relate to permitting and design review. So we will review the recommendations in that category to do one of three things, to look at those recommendations that this subgroup wants to adopt as is. Second, those recommendations that are not applicable. And third, those recommendations that need some additional refinement before the next meeting in a few weeks. Because we have limited time together, for recommendations that do need greater discussion or refinement, I'm asking that members will work on these after today's meeting and bring back proposed revisions to the next meeting just to keep us moving. As Julie mentioned earlier, at the next meeting, we will also discuss potential new recommendations. So to help guide our conversation, Dan Devon with the Michigan Dam Safety Program is with us to provide some background information to help ground the discussion, as well as, I believe, to address any questions or points of clarification that came up during the survey that you all completed recently. So before I pass the discussion over to Dan, are there any questions from task force members about our process for the next 45 minutes? Doing a quick check. I think the only person who wasn't able to join us today is Marty Holtgren. Otherwise, I see everybody else. So great. Okay. So Dan,
Want me to take it away?
okay, how can I support you? Yeah.
Alrighty. So I'm going to go ahead and try sharing my screen here. So let me know if you guys are able to see the presentation. Is that coming up?
Yes, looks
Yeah,
good.
we did, Dan.
Okay, perfect. So this is going to be kind of a quick walkthrough on our permitting and design review component of the dam safety program. Some of this is review from what we've covered before. Some of it I'm going to dive into a little bit more depth than what we presented in the first meeting. I will apologize. We pulled these together relatively last minute, so it's a lot of words, not a lot of pictures. So I'll try not to bore you to death. So starting off, as we presented before, we administer the dam safety program through two different statutory authorities. The first being the Part 315 Dam Safety Program, and then Part 307 in the lake levels. And those are under the NREPA Public Act 451. So looking at Part 307, inland lake levels, we actually don't have permitting authority under 307, but we do provide review and approved plans and specifications. So we support our other permitting staff when those projects do come up. We do have the authority on those types of projects if it's warranted based on recommendations from DNR Fisheries that we can require cold water release or fish passage at these types of structures. Under the Part 315 dam safety, we have permit authority. There are several projects that don't require permits, and those are basically minor maintenance activities. Generally, they're not impacting the structural integrity of the dams, so things like replacing stop logs, gates, minor concrete patching, minor fills, things like that. But then we do have a lot of projects that we provide permits for. So first, obviously, construction of a new dam, enlargement of an existing dam or an impoundment, specifically looking at if we're raising the level of the impoundment and potentially raising the hazard of the structure. Alterations of the dams, this would be major repairs or modifications. Dam removals, which we see a fair amount of those in Michigan now. And then we also have abandonment of dams, which really is very uncommon. I've not actually seen or heard of one, but it's basically an affirmative action by the owner to stop maintenance and operation. And the key there is making sure that they're eliminating the hazards associated with the dam. And then obviously reconstruction of a failed dam, assuming it's within 1 year of its failure. Otherwise, it's considered a new dam. Looking at our review fees, coming from the consulting industry, I can tell you that we work for cheap. So we have construction of a new dam, anything less or between 6 and 10 feet. So the lower end is about $500 for a review fee, $1,000 for 10 to 20, $3,000 for greater than 20 feet. And honestly, we very rarely receive applications for new dams in Michigan. I believe we've only seen 3 or 4 in the last 10 years. Most of ours are repairs, modifications, removals, or abandonments. For an individual permit, which would be a major project, we get $200 for review. And then a minor project, something that still requires a permit but doesn't have significant impacts to structural integrity or significant amounts of fill, that would just be $100. So, to better describe what our minor projects are, these are, like I said, modifications and repairs that have minor effect on the structural integrity. Under the statute, that is, or actually, sorry, not the statute, under the rules, that is temporary drawdown of 2 feet or less, between 25 and 300 cubic yards of material movement, and any erosion control measures that are less than 10,000 square feet or 2 cubic yards per lineal foot. And these generally don't require sealed engineering plans and specifications. So, like I said, very limited impact on the structure itself. Our individual permits covers everything else, all of our major repairs. These do require engineered plans and specifications. They need to adequately define the work that's going to be done, as well as the impacts associated with that work. One of the big things that we really emphasize with a lot of the engineers, and sometimes go round and round on, is making sure that we've got appropriate analyses to ensure structural integrity of the dam. So getting the structural, geotechnical, and H&H analyses performed to ensure that the work they're doing is stable both during construction as well as post-project. The only statutory design requirement that we actually have is spillway capacity. That is laid out within the statutes. Otherwise, we have the authority to require additional analyses to ensure the safety of the structure, but we don't have defined criteria. So again, kind of looking at that frequency of the permitting, we issue between 30 and 50 permits a year. 2 or 3 of them each year for dam removals. There are usually a few more that are non-regulated structures that come out every year. So we don't have regulatory authority in the dam safety program, but that falls under our other statutes. We see, like I said, 3 to 4 new dams in the past 10 years. Only one of those was on a stream. A lot of these lately have been either at CAFO, large ag facilities, or wastewater treatment facilities, things like that. And then most of our permitting is associated with repairs and rehabilitation. So a few large scale rehab projects, but mostly just repairs and modifications. And then our review timeframes tend to range between a couple weeks up to a year for the really large projects. And I can definitely say, as we are dealing with very large projects, they can take quite a bit of time given our limited staffing. So between Luke and I, we'll try and tag team those projects, but it is challenging to keep up with all of them. So under design review, I kind of talked about a little bit under the permitting, what's required, where we require them to provide us with appropriate plans and specifications, as well as all of the necessary analyses. We have to review all of that. So the things that we're generally looking for are the structural analyses, geotechnical analyses, H&H analyses for conveyance. But then we're looking at construction sequencing, water and flow management during construction, construction access, hazardous materials management, and then erosion control and sediment management throughout the project. So a lot of different facets that we're having to look at. And then on top of that, we're having to coordinate with our other resource folks to evaluate impacts to inland lakes and streams, wetlands, and other resources. So getting down to the meat of it, ASDSO's recommendations, we have 1, developing a more inclusive list of calculations and documents required for a permit, developing requirements, and actually I'll kind of elaborate on the first one. And so this is really going to help to streamline our review process and ensure that we're getting consistency across the board for permit applications, so that you know, we know what we're going to get every time. As we grow our staff, ideally with varying expertise, we'll be able to, you know, streamline that process and making sure people are getting the appropriate analyses and documents to assist with a full, complete review. They also recommend that we develop requirements for the dam owner to address hazard classification changes. This can be due to some of the proposed work or upgrades through the permitting process. This can also actually happen even if they aren't doing anything in changes in the watershed downstream. It's not uncommon to see homes or businesses go in downstream within a floodway or floodplain, basically downstream of a dam. And then we have finally making dam operation and maintenance a permitted activity, possibly under construction and modification permits. And this is one area where, you know, right now, basically, we will issue permits for dam owners when they are doing construction, but as soon as the construction is done, permit is closed out. And there's no permit associated with the ongoing operation of those dams. We do obviously have our statutory authorities to ensure that they're in compliance with dam safety requirements, but there's not anything really that holds the teeth to it as far as the operation goes. Furthermore, looking at the design review, they propose that we consider awarding engineering services and contract for supporting our program. This is looking both at review of major projects when they come in, where, you know, we may need additional expertise beyond what we have in-house. As you guys saw on that list of things that we have to review, the various analyses, it covers a broad range. I don't know anybody in the engineering field that says they can appropriately cover all of those facets. So having that support definitely would be valuable, and, you know, leading up to that point where we're staffed up. Additionally, there are other, you know, based on the recommendations from ASDSO, that consulting services could help to move along some of these initiatives and recommendations that have been put forth. They're asking that we require owner of complex projects to provide independent review board to affirm design. This, similar to the contracting support from consultants, would basically, on major projects, put the onus back on the owner to provide a third-party review of the design to ensure its appropriateness. Next, we have developed standard engineering report for design review. We do actually have some internal documentation for our design review or for our permit reviews. However, it's not necessarily a specific engineering report that goes with that review. So that would be something that we'd be looking at pushing forward. Ideally, that's something we also would be sharing with designers, such that we're getting consistency in our applications. And then with that, developing a standard checklist for permit applications that include a full suite of engineering analyses. And like I said, this is something that I can say from experience, we sometimes have to do a little more coaching to ensure that we're getting all of the information that we need for full analysis of a project. So some of the considerations, and this kind of carries over to a couple of other areas as well. When they were comparing our program to other Midwest states, some of the key takeaways is we don't inspect our high hazard potential dams as much as other states. And one of the things where this really carries over in this aspect is when we talk about our permit and design review process, we don't actually have construction inspection requirements. So we do have a condition within our permits typically that we require that the work's being done under the oversight of an engineer, but it's not necessarily, you know, we don't require any kind of reporting back to us, and we don't, unfortunately, oftentimes have the opportunity to get out ourselves and observe the construction until after it's completed, just based on staff availability. So that's kind of one of the aspects I think it's keying in on there. We don't inspect as much as other states, but also our statutes are kind of set up that way, and we rely on the owners to complete that. We have just as many rehabilitation and repair permits each year as most other states, but we do have more removals as compared to other states. And then one of the kind of the final considerations, you know, from our program and internally with Eagle is with the increased inspection frequency and or design review criteria, we may require kind of phasing this in such that the dam owners and the program itself isn't overloaded with compliance issues starting off with the first year that we're implementing this. So, you know, as we look at these recommendations and pushing these forward, we may want to consider some phasing of that process. So I burned through that fairly quickly. Hopefully quick enough that nobody fell asleep, but I'm open to any questions that anybody has. Otherwise, this is kind of the teaser to get the brains going.
That's great. Thank you, Dan. Dan, are you able to stop sharing your screen at this point?
Right. Yep, trying to find the button. There we go.
Sorry, I had my mute off. Could I ask Dan a quick question?
Certainly.
So all these recommendations that that you just went through, are any of these going to require legislative approval, or are they going to basically be able to be implemented without legislative approval?
So there are a few of these that would not require legislative approval. So providing basically the list of calculations and documents, or the checklists, or report templates, things like that, that's something that can be done internally without any external changes. So no legislative changes. Anything where we're pushing requirements onto the owner. So, you know, requiring them to address changes in hazard potential, which, I mean, it's sort of there. It's just, I guess, somewhat unwritten. Obviously, as soon as a dam changes from one hazard classification to another, they're required to meet that. There may just need to be some requirements as far as time frame for meeting those requirements when they make that change. Making dam operation and maintenance a permitted activity is something that definitely would require legislative change. You know, awarding an engineering services contracts may not, but we got to get the money from somewhere. So, you know, that may require, you know, some legislative interaction. And then the independent review board, much like getting a consultant, well, actually that one, because that would be a change in the permitting process, that would require some legislative engagement as well.
Okay, just one other quick question. You don't. I mean, just make it quick, and that is, do you see any changes in the actual, in part 451, the actual design requirements that are in that act, like the 5-acre, 6-foot rule, those sorts of things? Are there any recommendations in that report that would address that?
So I haven't seen any recommendations. I don't believe there's any recommendations in regards to changing the classifications that we have right now. But certainly as far as some of the design criteria itself, like spillway capacity, incorporating other design criteria such as geotechnical and structural requirements, that I believe is recommended, and that's discussed under other sections. So that again would probably require legislative.
Okay, thanks. That's good. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Dan, that was terrific. Thank you so much for giving the overview. I know that you and the rest of the staff have just been hustling to get materials ready for these breakouts, and we're very grateful. What I would like to do now with that base information is I can share the document that was emailed to the task force that lists the ASDSO recommendations for permitting and design review. And I would suggest we have until 11:15 that we go through those as a group, one at a time, and triage these as far as can this recommendation go forward as is? Is it possibly not applicable? And then is there any refinement needed? So would we be ready to do that then?
Sure.
Okay. Okay. All right, is the document that says permitting and design review at the top visible to everybody?
Yes.
Do you need me to enlarge it?
I'm good.
Okay.
It's okay, Elizabeth.
All right, great. So going to the ASDSO recommendations in the permitting section, I'll try to increase this a little bit in size. And really Dan's presentation followed these recommendations in order that they were provided in the documents or pre-meeting. So the first one, I will read this aloud, and then task force members, please share your thoughts on it. And I guess, Dan, if there's anything additional that you have to add as we go along. And I am keeping track here in an Excel document on what are the wishes of the subgroup for each of these recommendations. Okay, so this first one, permitting, this is 2020-09A, develop a more inclusive list of the calculations and documents to be provided by the dam owner, regardless of who the applicant is or the dam owner's engineer, to assure the dam will be designed, operated, and maintained in a safe manner.
So
mhm.
I guess a question I have is this referring to design calculations for a new dam only? Or is this talking about an existing dam and then we're going to ask people to come up with a list of calculations for an existing dam just because?
Paul,
Yeah.
sorry, the way I interpreted it was a list of requirements for each new project, each new permit application. But I may be wrong also, now that you raised that question. So it's a good question to find out what specifically this is applying to.
Dan,
The
anything to add?
options are either new or amendment to existing. If somebody makes an application to amend an existing permit, or if there's an obligation to go back outside of permit to develop that inclusive list. So I had the same questions coming in.
So I'll go ahead and say that, we do have under one of our next subgroups a sub discussion point of reevaluation. So I think that would be where we would be talking about, complete engineering analyses of a dam, an existing dam. I think as far as permitting goes, it's really associated with the work that's being proposed and ensuring that we have adequate information necessary for what is being proposed. I certainly think that this is something that needs to be a scalable list based on the size and breadth of the project. If you're not doing any concrete work or any steel work or anything like that, we obviously aren't going to really need any structural analyses. So I think it's something, it just needs to be a checklist probably where, we're going through and looking at the appropriate evaluations for the type of work being done. That's my 2 cents.
I guess the ambiguity here seems to come in at the very end where it says operated and maintained. Okay, so hydraulic spillway calculations, yeah, that addresses operation. That's something you'll do when you design the dam. I think those should be submitted with the design of a new spillway, for example. Maintained, I'm not sure what, to me, it starts to sound like we're getting into asking for calculations on things that are just out there. And I know, yeah, I'm on the second task force as well relating to the reevaluation section, but maybe there just needs to be some clarity put into here that this is referring to design of new dams, or more likely what's going to happen is design of a new significant change in a dam, right? Somebody's going to fix an embankment and totally rebuild it, or are they going to add a gate or something like that? Maybe it just needs to be clarify that point.
The other thing I think I would probably throw out too is, like, if you look at item C and it talks about that long-term permitting of operation and maintenance, I think it probably is something that's open for discussion amongst this group as to whether or not you guys feel operation and maintenance is something that should be permitted. And, is that the avenue as they're proposing here under that permitting process? Is it something separate for operation and maintenance? I guess you guys have the ability to propose it whichever way you want.
So I'm just going to step in here to, again, remind us that we need to triage these. And so it sounds like this one does need some refinement and some additional attention. So I know I'm sure it's very unsatisfying to have to move through these so quickly, but we will be discussing them more in between the meeting, between this meeting and next one, and have some more discussion in subgroups at the next meeting.
So Elizabeth, in support of that, I couldn't help but look at our 15-minute time limit and see that we have like 6 items to get through. So, unfortunately, that's only 2 minutes per item. So if the group wants to keep that in mind, to get through it, we can't do a whole lot of discussion.
Yeah.
So I would consider this one, then 9A, to be one that needs refinement, and we're noting what those questions are. Okay, all right, great, thank you. So then moving on to 2020-09-B, which is developing requirements for the dam owner of significant or low hazard dams to address the potential change in hazard classification and the related changes to the dam that will be required as a result of the change in hazard classification. So is this as worded? Is this a thumbs up, adopt as is, or not applicable, or that there are questions and we need to refine this a bit more?
Questions?
Okay.
The only comment I'd quickly make is again, the one that stands out is the or with the hyphen there. Is it and or? I mean,
For these significant or low hazard dam?
Is that hyphen there for some significant reason?
It looks like it applies. It's just trying to say significant hazard or low hazard dams, I think.
Okay, so we're looking at both.
I mean, the question here is that the state is the one who determines what the hazard classification is. Are we going to ask the owner to go and figure that out, what their classification is? That's the state's to do that. And if the state comes along and says, well, hey, you're actually a significant hazard dam now, then yeah, the owner's got to respond to that. But it sounds like we're asking the owner to figure out what their hazard classification is.
Well, that does occur in the permit review when if you have a 200-year flood area and someone builds a house in it, it changes your category, period, and you have no control over it.
Well, right, but that's
so you have to do that during your 5-year or 4 or 3-year permit submittal.
Right. You could, yeah, you see if it's you comment on whether the hazard classification is still appropriate in the report. Yes, you do that. But it's ultimately the state that's going to set that.
Okay.
That the consultant or whoever's doing the report can say, well, this seems like an appropriate classification, and state of Michigan gets that and they'd make a decision whether or not they're going to reclassify you. So that's the only question I had there.
So in that regard, I read this as the dam owner addressing the potential change and the related changes to the dam as a result of the classification. So the way I read this was the state still ultimately classifies the dam, and this is developing the requirements for the dam owner to address a potential change. So presumably the state is identifying deficiencies that the owner would have to address, where upon not addressing those deficiencies, the result would be a reclassification. So to me, this was things like it starts out by saying development of requirements. So that's like identifying timelines and permit requirements and all the design and construction requirements. So basically another checklist is the way I read this. I don't know if Dan saw it that way or not.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's really setting up particularly the time frame. These changes happen and hazard classification changes. It's really setting up requirements for, I would see is when that has to happen. It's so hard to go to an owner and say, hey, tomorrow you're going to be this classification. You need to meet that or else you're in violation.
Yeah.
Having something that lays out the path forward, I think is what they're looking for, something more standardized and codified.
I
We have
think I was
enough.
I was just going to say, I think I was in support of this with a little clarity, to avoid more, some ambiguity and to maybe reflect more of what Dan was describing, addressing timelines and deadlines and checklists and other requirements for a dam owner in specific regards to potential reclassification.
So are we at a point where, based on what Glenn and Dan have just presented, is this something that the group is comfortable saying yes, thumbs up, let's go forward with that clarification? Or do you want to put that in the needs refinement category and come back to it?
I'm fine with it if that clarification is included in there somehow, just to state that, the state's reclassifying and it's addressing the response of the owner to a reclassification.
Okay.
Um,
Just by a show of thumbs up, is that acceptable to you?
Yes. That's okay.
Okay. Okay, great, thank you. Good, okay, then moving on to 2020-09-C, develop a permit period for dam construction permit that notes a time period for construction and also provides for ongoing operation and maintenance of the dam or development of a permit to be issued following dam safety programs, acceptance of work completed under the dam construction permit for the ongoing operation and maintenance of the dam for the lifetime of the facility.
So my apologies maybe for not knowing the program that well, but is there currently any requirement for a dam owner once they get permitted and they build a brand new dam? Is there any ongoing responsibility for them to provide any inspection documentation?
So there's a requirement for them to provide inspection documentation that, depending on its hazard classification, is 3 through 5 year frequency. There's not any specific requirements on operation and maintenance other than, we've got the vague language that they have to ensure the safety and stability of their dam. And if deficiencies are identified during the inspections and they don't address them, we have the authority to go in and issue notice of violations or take emergency actions if necessary.
I don't know. I'm a little hesitant about a operator permit. It seems to me that, we could put some language in there to say that during the inspections that are done every X number of years, then at that time, you talk more about the operations and maintenance that's happened over the last few years, but I'm not sure what kind of, it sounds like a administrative process here, and it's just hard to say what that's going to entail. I mean, the number of contacts that are going to be required per year, for example, with the agency, it's a little vague as to what's going to be needed there to maintain this permit.
I'll, Paul, can I chime in?
Please.
I thought about the requirements that the city of Ann Arbor has from the federal program in maintaining and operating the two federal regulated dams. And while they are exhaustive in, the design submissions and the safety reviews and the construction follow-up and things like that, they are very much hands-off in regards to operations and maintenance, O&M, if you will. I have a requirement to maintain the run of river and demonstrate that. But everything else mostly falls under design, safety, and construction. And O&M is, really treated is separate, and they don't get into a whole lot of, micromanaging of that effort.
All right.
So
Again, I'm going to stem conversation. So
Okay.
my apologies. But it sounds, so we've got a sense of some of the discussion on this. So it sounds like we need to do some refining on this one. And we will continue the conversation after this subgroup. Okay. Because now we're, I think, at 9 after the hour. So we have pretty literally 2 minutes for these design review topics. So this one is design review. This is 2020-10-A. And to save time, I won't read all of it, but this is to consider periodically, that is every 4 years, awarding an engineering services contract to a qualified consulting firm that can be readily available to augment the dam safety program staff as needed. And then there's some detail there on what could be done with such a contract. I will go ahead and ask the question, can this be adopted as is? Or there concerns?
I guess just for the sake of the group, if I could share our experience. Like, to me, I don't know if we need to review each bullet point to say adopt as is, but nevertheless, the city of Ann Arbor actually utilizes a program exactly like this. And we find that it is just critically important in our operations. There's so much flexibility in it. It's treated like an as-needed contract with consulting firms. You can ramp up and you can ramp down, and you dole out tasks and you get invoiced only as work as needed. So I believe the state would find a lot of great value in it, and to me, considering the increased efforts that we're all talking about here, to me this is just vitally important.
DOT also has many of these examples. Same thing that Glenn was talking about. I'd be very supportive.
I basically would probably say adopt as is.
Dan, you're muted.
Yeah, I was muted. I'm sorry. I have a horn backing up back of my window here. My concern again with this is for the small dam owner, having to hire a qualified consulting firm. I mean, that may have always been a lot of folks that do these small dams are one-person operations. And I think in this case, I having to go to a qualified engineering firm for all of this for very small dam owners is going to be difficult. And so I'm just pointing that out at this point.
I think this piece is only to extend the dam safety program staff. It's kind of a QA piece, isn't it?
That's
Quality
correct.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
I guess I'd wondered is, and I'm perfectly fine leaving this as a recommendation, but does this capability not exist today?
I can tell you that our staff of 2 does not have the expertise to cover all facets of dam safety, dam design. And quite frankly, even if we had 4 or 5 people, to be able to have the expertise to cover all those facets would be extremely challenging.
I understand. I guess my question is, do you have an ability to go out to contract for engineering services today?
Yes, I think we even have the mechanism already in place through DTMB to actually provide these services very, very quickly.
Yes, Dan, that's correct. The state does use this format for other agencies or groups. It's just a matter of incorporating it into the dam safety program.
Yep.
So again, to move us along, just a couple minutes left. It sounds like this could be an adopt as is based on the conversation that happened in order for the task force to continue moving forward this recommendation. So 2020-10B is requiring the owner of proposed complex projects to provide an independent board of review to affirm the owner's design. And real quickly, because we are running out of time, does this need some more discussion, or is it a thumbs up?
So this is if I'm reading this right, this was what Stan was concerned about, requiring a dam owner to take upon the, the expense and the hardships involved in a professional consulting firm. Is that correct? Because this item has very little effort impact to the state. This impact is really targeted directly for the dam owner.
Yeah, I think this begs a lot of questions without
Okay.
more of our 30 seconds, but.
Okay, so we're going to refine that one. And the last one is 2020-10C, developing a standard format dam safety program engineering report.
A little bit of refinement just to make it a little flexible, that's all, but it's a good idea in general.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you all. So again, there'll be follow-up. So now, thank you again. Good to see you. I might see some of you again in the next one, but you can leave this meeting and go to the next link on your agenda for today. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Elizabeth.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank you.